Hello and welcome to another day of Bookmas. Today I am going to tell you about 5 books that I read in 2025 that kept me up reading all night long. Just books that were so captivating that I couldn't put them down. So I read quite a few good books this year, but these books were really unique in a way that I was so into reading them, that they were so well paced that I felt like I couldn't put them down. I was so invested in the story, in the characters, that I just didn't want to stop reading, that I stayed up all night reading them, or at least I wanted to, even though adult life came in the way. And I'm really excited to tell you about the first book. That was One Dark Window. One Dark Window is the first part of a duology by Rachel Gillick, and it is kind of a dark fantasy book which has a really unique magic system that is based around these cards. And what really made this book stand out to me and why I was so captivated was the really interesting magic system, but also the relationships between the characters. The writing was just so beautiful. And you could definitely really tell that the stakes in this book were so high and the world building was really vivid. And to me, it really felt like I was getting sucked into this world. I wasn't really even in reality anymore. It also has this kind of mystery element to it, which is also something that I really love in fantasy books. And also the story in and of itself was so well paced. It made me want to pick up the second part of the duology as fast as possible. I think overall with this book it was just the vibes that were really what drew me into it, and the original idea, because that is something that I sometimes struggle with as somebody who just reads a lot, that I feel like when an idea is something that I've read so many times, I'm not really captivated by it anymore, or it needs to be something really special that is done with this trope. But this book just felt really original and like no other book that I've read before. It had such a distinct voice and such a distinct magic system and story, and the characters really had their own motivations, and yeah, just overall a really good book that I can definitely recommend if you want to read something special. The second book that kept me up reading all night, or for multiple nights because it just is a bit longer, is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. Obviously, this is the third part of Fourth Wing. This is a series that I was just so excited for. I've waited not that long, but I've waited quite a few months for this to come out. And I really wanted to know how the story continued. I was really invested in the storyline already. I wanted to find out what happened to the characters, how the story continued, and I really enjoyed it as well while I was reading it. I just love this series, and also obviously dragons is a huge part what makes this book so exciting, and also the magic. And I'm not going to spoil anything about what happens in this book or in any of the other books, because it's the third part of a series, but it just is a really interesting series to me. I'm really looking forward to the next books whenever they're going to come out. That's going to take a while, I think, but I'm definitely going to be equally as excited as I was about this book. And this is a book that also made me want to reread the whole series, so definitely did what it intended to do for me. I know not everyone feels the same way about this, but I really think that the characters are really interesting, and there were quite a few interesting reveals. And at times the book didn't feel like it was that fast-paced or that there was a lot happening, because it is the third part of a 5-book series, and again it's pretty long, but it still made me want to continue reading, and I think that has a lot to do with how invested I was about the characters and the series and the world in general. So yeah, this is also definitely one of the books that I finished faster than I typically would for a fantasy book of this size. For Onyx Storm, I knew that this book was probably going to be one that was going to be really captivating. But a different book that really did the same thing for me was Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and that was my first Taylor Jenkins Reid book that I ever read. So I didn't really know what to expect going into it, and I didn't really know what to expect going into the whole story. And I didn't think that it was going to be a book that I was particularly invested in, but the way the story was told, I was kept on my toes the whole time. I was so invested into the story. It was really amazing. I don't know how that happened because I'm not usually a fan of tennis. I mean, I had a time where I was a little bit interested in it and I watched some games, but never really like a huge tennis fan. And this book is about a tennis player, and it tells her story about her comeback as the world champion. And she is someone who was on top of the world list at a point, and now somebody is going to claim her title or break her record. And even though she is a really, really good player, she is the underdog in that situation. Because for one, she is older now, and in tennis that is a huge disadvantage if you want to play at that level. And also I think she had an injury. So there are a few things that make it highly unlikely that she will get her spot back. But this is also a story about determination, about willpower, about what it means to be so invested in a goal and to have something in your life that is so important to you, and how that also affects your personal relationships and how your mind really can overcome a lot of things if you just really want it. But it's not just that, it also tells a story about media and media coverage for women and how women are treated in media. And we also get a glimpse of the other side of the story, of the person who she wants to beat and what that also means for her and her personal feelings. And yeah, it just is a really captivating story that I didn't expect to be that at all. The next book that kept me up reading was also a book where I really didn't expect it, and I still really can't explain to you why. There's no logical explanation for this. It is Girl Abroad by Elle Kennedy, and this book is not one where I would say the story is really unique or particularly well thought out. It really just is a romance book, and it is a love triangle. But for some reason this book caught me so off guard, and I was just so invested into the storyline. I don't know why. I kept reading it like it was a bag of chips that I just couldn't stop eating. I think it had to do with me picking this book up in the bookstore on a whim. I went there and I saw it and I was like, oh, this storyline sounds like something in a romance book that would really interest me personally. Because it is about a girl going abroad to study in London, and that is something that I kind of also have done, so I could relate to that. Even though a lot of the parts of what happens in this book are wildly unrealistic. And then the girl in the book, her name is Abby. She is also the daughter of a rock star, and she goes to live in a shared flat with some flatmates that she finds out are all guys. When she moves there, she thought they were all girls, but then she has this love triangle with a guy of their friend group and one of her flatmates. And I don't know what it was about this book, because it also isn't a short one. This, for romance, is a pretty long book. In German, this book has 540 pages, which in German books usually are longer than the English version. But still, this is pretty long. And I do know that I like Elle Kennedy as an author. Usually I also had the same thing when I read The Deal and all of the other books in that series. I was really invested into that as well, even though the books are not that unique in their storyline. I think it's just something about Elle Kennedy's writing style that just makes me read their books so fast. And I was really happy about this because one of the last books by Elle Kennedy that I read, I just couldn't connect with at all. And I was really disappointed in that. But this one, I really did connect to, and I don't know if I would really recommend this because the whole romance is not something that I would typically enjoy because it is this weird love triangle and it really drags on throughout the whole book, and only pretty far into the book we find out who she actually chooses, or rather who she ends up with. But maybe that was also part of why I enjoyed it so much, I don't know. But this book was really a surprise for me and it did keep me hooked. And I think I finished it in 1 or 2 sittings, so make of that what you will. And the 5th book that really made me want to keep listening, because I listened to this as an audiobook, was Not Quite Dead Yet by Holly Jackson. And that is a thriller, and I just finished it pretty recently, so my memory of it is still a bit better than of the other books. And what is really special about this thriller is that it is about a woman who tries to solve her own murder. It is about Jet, and Jet is the daughter of a really wealthy family. And one night after going to this Halloween event, she gets home and she is attacked by someone and they hit her on the head. And she wakes up in the hospital and learns that she only has about 7 days to live, and she has to make a decision of what to do with that, and she decides that she will find her murderer. And she starts this investigation and uncovers more and more family secrets about people in her life, in her town. She has to find out who really had the motive to do it, and also how that connects with some events in her past. And then obviously there's also still a killer on the loose, and she is actually being attacked again over the course of the book, and she has to find out if it was the same person or somebody else entirely. And she does it with the help of her best friend, and it just was so twisty and interesting and such a unique concept again that I really enjoyed. That she was the one trying to save her own murder, and how the police also dealt with that, and how she kind of at times did a better job at it than the police, because she obviously knows more about her own life and about what people did and what they said and what happened. She also doesn't have to do the whole bureaucracy stuff, but then again, she also isn't an officer, so she doesn't really know how to deal with all of this. And obviously she also has to deal with her family and them kind of grieving her while she's still alive, and how people in her life are dealing with the situation and all of the things. There are a lot of things in this book that are really interesting, a lot of moving parts, and I think it was a really interesting thriller because of that. I don't tend to enjoy like the more typical kind of thrillers. I did previously enjoy Holly Jackson's YA books, and I think it's really cool that she wrote this book and that she decided to go with a bit of an older character. I really hope that she continues doing that because I love her mystery thriller books. And I have to say I was a bit disappointed about the ending, but also I could see why she did it this way, and I feel like every other ending would have kind of felt like a cop-out, so not spoiling anything here, but it definitely stays interesting until the very end. And I also really like the character relationships in this. So yeah, these were the 5 books that kept me up reading all night. All very different from each other, very different genres, very different books, which really is testament to the fact that all genres have like things that you can like as a reader. And for example, I used to think for the longest time that I didn't like thrillers anymore, or I didn't like literary fiction, and it turns out you just have to find the right books in the genre to actually enjoy it. what a revelation. And what I also learned about this is that it really isn't about the length of the book, because some of these books are so long and I still binged them. I'm still trying to figure out what like the combo, what it really is that draws me into this book. What I really took from this was that I really enjoy unique storylines and unique ways of storytelling or unique voices in writing, but also sometimes you just need a palate cleanser and something that is just a book that is a bit predictable, and you just want to read like one of those well-written ones that you just connect with the writing style and you just have to binge it, if you know what I mean. That's how it went for me with Girl Abroad by Elle Kennedy, for example. But also, these were binge-worthy books. Doesn't mean that these were my favorite books of the year, because just because you take longer to read a book doesn't mean it's worse or anything, but it definitely can get you out of a reading slump. And of course, if it is a book that I binged, it's highly likely that I enjoyed it. So now I'm interested to hear what your binge-worthy books were in 2025. And if you have read any of the ones that I talked about. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye!